I am David Prager, son of Judy Prager, née Strauss. I was born in London in 1955. The story I am about to relate begins in the 30s of the last century in Michelstadt, a small picturesque town in central Germany. In a small tower adjacent to the ancient synagogue lived my grandparents, Leo and Dia Strauss, together with their 5 children, David, Herbert Elchanan, Uri, Judith and Miriam. Grandpa Leo served as shochet, slaughterer, chazan, cantor, and Jewish studies teacher in the town and surrounding villages, while Grandma Dia brought up the 5 children. The fragile fabric of life there began to slowly unravel, the harassment of the town's Jews increased and intensified, and Grandpa Leo was even imprisoned for a short period in the local jail on a trumped-up complaint by a local woman. The Strauss family therefore decided to leave Michelstadt and move to Frankfurt to be close to where the rest of the wider family was living, and there my Aunt Eva was born. The feeling of the noose tightening led many of Grandpa Leo's family to leave Germany and seek sanctuary all over the world. His sister Amalia moved to France, his sister Jenny and her husband Moritz Meyer emigrated to Argentina, his sister Hedwig and her family went to Holland, and his brothers Izzy and Jakob and their families emigrated to Palestine. Only Leo and his sisters Rosel, Lena, Betty and their families remained in Germany. On Kristallnacht, Grandpa Leo and his 3 brothers-in-law, who were still in Germany, were arrested and imprisoned in Buchenwald concentration camp. All 4 families now understood that they had to leave the country, and immediately. The women began to try and find solutions. They decided to send the older children of the family by themselves to Holland by kindertransport. My 3 uncles, David, Herbert Elchanan and Uri Strauss, together with their cousins Margot and Paul Peterman and Berthold David Grunbaum, were sent at the beginning of December 1938 on their own to a foreign country without being able to take their leave and say goodbye to their fathers, who were still imprisoned in the concentration camp. Together with them, another 20 children from Frankfurt arrived in Holland, where, after a period spent in the Jewish orphanage, they were dispersed amongst Jewish foster families throughout Holland. Families Grunbaum, Borenstein and Peterman, who stayed behind in Germany, fled a while later to Belgium and even managed to bring over to them afterwards their children, who had previously been sent to Holland. The only exceptions were Grandpa Leo and Grandma Dia, who with the help of Dia's brother Herman Rosemann succeeded in reaching London with their 3 daughters. In the meantime, the Second World War broke out, and Holland and Belgium were conquered by the Germans. Communications by letters had existed between the parents in London and their boys in Holland, but as the military situation worsened, this line of communication was cut. Leo and Dia continued their desperate attempts to bring their 3 sons to London, but it was not to be. Meanwhile, my Aunt Ruth was born, and when the war ended, their youngest daughter, my Aunt Naomi, entered the world. Following the end of the war, Grandpa Leo began a desperate search for his 3 sons, but there was no trace of them. Only the 3 children of the Peterman family, Margot, Paul and Odette, were found alive. They had been hidden by their parents in a convent in southern Belgium. Margot and Odette accepted the invitation of their uncle and aunt, Leo and Dia, to live with them in England, but Paul decided he would stay in Belgium. From when their whereabouts disappeared in the Holocaust until 2005, the fate of the 3 boys was unknown, apart from Leo and Dia, who had discovered some of the bitter truth during their search, but kept silent about it. All that we possessed, apart from a few photos, were 2 old postcards that the boys had written at the Westerbork concentration camp and on the eastward-bound deportation train in the spring of 1943. In 2005, I travelled with my father Oscar on a routes trip to Germany. Whilst there, when visiting a Jewish museum in Frankfurt, the Judengasse Museum, we discovered for the first time, and completely by accident, details of the boys' lives while in Holland, and also the date and place of these 3 young children's murder. Friday, 6th Adar 5704, 13th of March 1943. The next day I wrote down all that we had learned that day in the museum, and I quote from what I wrote. As I write all these details down, I can't help thinking about 3 small boys living under Nazi occupation for nearly 4 years, far from their parents and sisters, being split up, hiding, running, and then finally being captured or rounded up, transported in cattle trucks around Europe, and finally meeting their awful fate, perhaps together, perhaps not, in a Nazi murder factory. Alongside that, I also imagine 3 little boys going to school, being cared for by foster families, and in mail correspondence with their family in London. And then I think of Grandma and Grandpa having to remake and continue their lives while living with the awful consequences of their decision. The truth is, I was frozen by all this so personal information, and only really reacted hours later in the airport when I was telling the story to my wife Rita on the phone while Dad was in the duty-free and completely broke down. This was the spark that ignited an intragenerational and multi-year research project whose aim was, and remains, to expose the sad mosaic of the Strauss family during the Holocaust. In this research, I was joined by the grandson of my Aunt Naomi, Noam Korb.
שמי נועם קורב, נכדה של נעמי קורב לבית שטראוס. נולדתי בירושלים בשנת 1995. מאז שהייתי ילד, התעניינתי מאוד בסיפור המשפחתי, ובמיוחד בסיפורם של 3 האחים של סבתי נעמי. כאשר נחשפתי לסיפור, כבר ידענו את העובדות הבסיסיות על גורלם של הילדים, אך החלטתי להעמיק בו. בשנת 2013 נסעתי יחד עם בית הספר שלי לפולין, ובמהלך המסע ביקרנו לבקשתי גם במחנה ההשמדה סוביבור. מהמחנה לא נשאר כל זכר, מלבד מסילת הרכבת והשלט, עליו נכתב באותיות שחורות וגדולות, סוביבור. היה זה רגע עוצמתי ומרגש מאוד עבורי, להגיע יחד עם חבריי לכיתה אל המחנה, להדליק נרות זיכרון, לקרוא קדיש ולהקריא את מכתבם האחרון של הבנים, אותו שלחו מרכבת הגירוש של מותם. תקיעת השופר שתקענו על אדמת המחנה, המשיכה להדהד בראשי עוד זמן רב. 2 לאחר מכן, החלטתי לחבר ספר שתכליתו לברר לפרטים את קורותיה של משפחת שטראוס המורחבת בשואה. במהלך המחקר שלי, גיליתי פרטים מדהימים על קורותיה של המשפחה לאורך המלחמה. בכל פעם אחזה אותי מחדש ההתרגשות העצומה, כאשר זכיתי למצוא תמונה או מסמך חדש ששופך מעט אור על קורות המשפחה. בזכות המחקר חוברו קשרי משפחה שהיו מנותקים מזה עשרות שנים. גם הערפל שאפף את סיפורם של בני המשפחה החל אט-אט להתפוגג. בעוד בתחילת המסע כלל לא ידענו את מספרם ושמותיהם של כלל בני משפחת שטראוס, כיום אנו יודעים לספר שערב השואה מנתה המשפחה המורחבת 37 איש, מתוכם נספו במלחמה 17 נפשות. בסרט זה יוצגו עדויותיהם וזיכרונותיהם של ילדי דור המלחמה למשפחות שטראוס ופיטרמן.
There were no albums. There were very few pictures of anything because our parents left Germany pretty quickly and couldn't take much with them. But there were 3 or 4 pictures, I remember them, around the house. And we knew who they were. We knew they were our brothers. We didn't quite know what happened to them when we were younger, but as we got older, we did find out.
They were a couple, I remember. One of them, the 3 boys, one's on the swing and the other one sort of next to it and behind. And the other one is the photograph which I now have, which my father has actually written the names of the boys at the back in his very distinctive handwriting. And that photo now has been reproduced on the front of Noam's book.
Yeah, there were photos on display. And in the albums. Not a lot, because they didn't have such a lot of photos.
My parents never spoke much about them, but one fine day, and I don't know what, they started to talk about it. And then we found out, it was long after the war. I was 3 when they went away. I was supposed to go with them, and they never talked about them. They didn't talk about them. Then one fine day, I don't know what made them, I think after the war when my father found my cousins in Belgium, and then he started to talk about all what had happened.
I I think I was about 10.
Not sure. I think round about 10, but much later as to what had happened to them, or at least it's part of the story. I used to dream I was walking down the street and I would see them and recognise them and take them home and say, look where I found it, etc. But that's a child's wishes, which of course didn't come true.
I think I always knew. They must have talked about it. I don't remember ever suddenly finding out. It was always something we knew. That it wasn't like suddenly one fine day somebody told me. I don't remember that at all.
No, not really, because they died so young, you know. And as we found out more things about where they went, and to Westerbork and to the camps, and every now and again something happened that they were there. Like when Oscar went to Germany and found out the date of when they went to the camps. But in between, we didn't really talk too much about it. It was just, we knew it happened.
Not when we were children. But as we got older, I would say maybe the last 30 years, then we did talk to each other about it, and what we had perceived and what we thought. I remember a particular time I said to my older sister, to Judy, I said, do you ever remember a day when the house was quiet and people were crying? There must have been a day after the war when my parents got confirmation that the boys were dead and were not coming back. And you would think at that point that there would be a certain atmosphere in the house, but there wasn't. And I've asked my sisters, especially the older one, did she recall a day like that? And she said no, she didn't either. Actually, I asked my mother a few days later. I asked her, when you found out that the boys weren't coming back, weren't you devastated? She says, yes, of course we were. She says, but at that point, there were so many people who had come in from the continent, left over from the camps and from Europe, and they had lost their wives and 6 children, and their husbands and 4 children. She said, at least I still had Daddy, and I had you girls. And it would have been a little kind of inconsiderate, considering there were people so much worse off than we were. That was her answer.
Not much, no. I know once asked my mother something, and she said, in those days, everybody lost children. And they already felt lucky that they came out with 3 children, because they lost 3, but they still had 3. Some families lost all their children. We knew people like that in North London when we grew up.
Yes, I didn't know what he did because he didn't talk about it, but I know he contacted the Red Cross. In that search, he discovered 2 nieces and a nephew who were rescued from Belgium, who he brought over to England afterwards. But he didn't talk much at the time. But slowly, the bits of news came out. You know, they found out that they'd been in Holland, and they'd been in Westerbork, and they'd been with well, they call it aunt, but it was actually a 2nd or 3rd cousin of my father's. You know, that's where they were sent to when they left Germany, with this kinder transport they had. And I was also supposed to be on it, and then the last minute I wasn't. My mother took me off.
No, I was too young. I remember when he brought back the 2 cousins, Odette and Margaret. That I do remember.
No, I don't remember. It took, I think, quite a long time because we found the cousins, you know, these girls in Belgium. So there was always a chance that who, you know, they were also. As I say, my parents didn't talk too much about it. It was a very difficult subject.
No, I don't. And I always thought it was a little strange that life kind of went on as normal as it could be in those days. But as I said, I did ask my mother about that, and I think I spoke about that before.
No.
No, I don't remember any of it.
Not at the beginning, but they went to Israel somewhere along the way for the first time. And they went to the Yad Vashem. And my parents made the big mistake of going into the children's memorial hall. And from what I understand, they were showing movies there of what people, the doctors, the German doctors, were experimenting on children, breaking bones, seeing how long it would take to heal. My mother never recovered from that Israeli trip.
No, they weren't. They were very, very rarely mentioned. I don't remember them actually mentioning them ever.
No, not noticeably. I didn't feel it. In general, they were marvellous. One didn't feel any bad things at home. We didn't feel it at all. Let's say I didn't. And I don't think the others did either. It wasn't like, oh, don't say anything, don't say anything. It wasn't like that at all. I remember when my mother died, my mother's very good friends wrote to us, and she said all the years they were jolly and happy and lively, my parents, except for the 1 year after they found out they'd lost the boys. But I don't remember it.
They were not mentioned at our weddings and things like that. But as we had children, and we named them our children, which were my parents' grandchildren, and we named them after the boys, it was mentioned. They were mentioned.
No. I didn't even know when the birthday was. We found out afterwards, but we were kind of a book with birth certificates and things in, but we didn't know when their birthdays were.
No.
No, they weren't.
To this day, I don't know when their birthdays, no.
No. He never said anything.
No, he never said. And you know, as children, I don't know if one is self-centered, but it just wasn't part of their life.
There was no pressure, but I think we just decided it would be a nice thing to do, you know, because those boys have no children, and were, unfortunately. And so we decided, and so when I was the first, I had David, and we called him David, and we gave a second name, because as I said, when people die young, we don't give only that name.
No, but we were never asked. You have to remember that, you know, we were 5 girls, and we married guys who also had families, who they, you know, fathers and grandfathers and uncles who they wanted to name their sons after. There was never any pressure from our parents.
I can't imagine there was actual pressure from my parents. I think they just did it because of the three boys, and by that time we knew obviously that they weren't alive anymore, and this was to remember them by.
There was no pressure of many parents, not where I remember. We just automatically did it.
I don't remember them at all because they went away in about, in 38 I think they went sent to Holland. In 38 I was 3, I just don't remember. My very first memory is my father leaving Germany, but he had to go separate to us. And he'd been in the camp, and I remember he walked up the stairs to the plane. It was a small plane. It was unusual to go by plane. And he stood at the top of the stairs and he waved his black kippah. And what bothered me many, many years, what did he think? He never told us. What did he think? His 3 boys had been sent away to Holland. He'd been at a camp. And then, because I was on the wrong list, we couldn't all go together. I had to be changed. My destination had to be changed. But he had to get out, because otherwise he had to stay in the camp. And I thought, well, he walked up the stairs to this little plane, going to a country, he didn't speak any English, and he's leaving behind his wife and 3 little girls. It was me, Miriam and Eva already. Eva was a baby. And his 3 boys were in Holland. And what did he think? What went in his mind? And he never told us, It must have been so awful for him, but he had such sort of faith in God. He was a very strong person, and in his mind everything was going to work out okay. My parents, when they discovered them, and they made the condition if they come to England and want to live with us, they have to keep the family rules. In other words, be religious, which was not easy for them. They'd been brought up in a convent, like Goyim, I can't even say like non-religious Jews. They were like Goyim.
I don't know about Margot, because she was older, but certainly I don't think Odette ever knew she was Jewish till my parents found them and brought them to England. And it was very difficult. I only realized later on in life how difficult it was, because here there was our home, very, very orthodox. My parents, I can't say were unbending, but they had their way. Paul never came. He wanted to stay in Belgium. He had made friends with some boys and he lived there. But Odette and Margot came over. And Margot never really got on with my parents because she couldn't seem to understand that she couldn't just live her own life in our home. My parents had five little girls, and what do you do when people come in and they have they don't keep Shabbos? It wasn't their fault. That was their lifestyle. And I don't know how my parents ever thought that they could integrate them, but they obviously felt they had no choice. And really they didn't, because my father found these were his sister's children, and he found them after the war, maybe while he was looking for his own children. And thank God, the convent in Belgium, they did turn over their Jewish children, which a lot of convents did not. And that's how they came to us.
Right. Well, unfortunately, Margot in particular, there was friction. It wasn't terribly obvious at the time, I think, looking back. Odette, I don't recall there being any problems at all.
Odette was the youngest, was fine, she fitted in well. I remember we had this big bedroom where we had all of us in the great big bedroom, bunk beds, whatever. She fitted in fine.
I was too young to really appreciate What? I remember when they came, and I remember that afterwards there were some troubles with Ma got, of course, some trouble. I don't actually remember it.
Talking was difficult because we spoke English and they spoke, I don't know what they spoke, I think it was Flemish and maybe even German, I don't know. But actually we managed, I don't know, maybe my parents translated. It was fine. It seemed funny because I was always the oldest and suddenly there was somebody older than me. Margaret is older than me.
We didn't talk to them too much because there wasn't a language. We only spoke English. We understood German because my parents used to speak to us in German and we used to answer in English. Our parents learned English from us and we learned German from them. I cannot remember. There had to be some form of communication, but I can't remember what it was.
How did we feel? We probably thought, oh God, another, more. We were quite fascinated that Odette, I can't remember Margot doing it, but Odette putting food in her pocket for the first, I can't remember exactly how long, but at the beginning, my father explained to us this is because where they were hidden in the war and food was very short, that they realised, they knew, they didn't know when their next meal was, and just in case. And that took about, as far as I remember, about 3 weeks till they stopped doing it.
They spoke French, and we didn't speak French. I presume they learned English pretty quick. I cannot remember.
But children manage to communicate even if they don't actually speak the same language.
And I remember him because he was very nice looking and he looked exactly like Danny Kaye, who was a popular film star at the time. He had this curly, gingery, blonde hair, and he had a dimple in his chin. He was very nice looking. And I remember him coming to our house. I don't know whether we spoke to him, but I don't know what language I would have spoken, but I do remember seeing him. But we were in contact with him. My parents were in contact with him. We talked about him, and is he going to come again, etc., but we never didn't. Not as far as I knew. Come again.
I remember Paul coming to our home in St Kilda's Road once. That's the first and last time I ever saw him. He came to visit his sister Odette. I have no recollection if it was the Olympics or even what year it was, but I do remember. I do remember that.
I saw him for sure. I didn't know when it came. He came for sure. I remember being in the garden with him. That I do remember. I think that's the only time I ever saw him. I think he was blondish, if I remember rightly.
Yes, especially my father. My father was a person who was always very optimistic. I remember when Naomi was born, my sister Naomi, and by then, she was born in 46, we already knew that the boys had gone. So he'd lost 3 sons. So I thought, that my sisters were too young, they didn't even know my mother was pregnant. I discovered she was pregnant because I found we had still in England at that time ration books. It was a book with the food. And when you were pregnant, you got an extra one to get extra food, and extra good food. And I saw it in the cupboard, and two made 4, and I realized, it took a long time. My parents didn't tell me them. And when that baby was born near me, I thought, he'll be upset it's not a boy, because he's lost his 3 boys. He's already got 4 girls, noch a girl. And I asked him one day, afterwards, I said, were you disappointed when Naomi was born? And he said, no, every child is a gift from God. I can't remember exact words, And he said, as long as the child is healthy, that it doesn't matter. And I was so surprised. I said, did you not really want a boy? He said, no, it would have been nice to have a boy to carry on the family name. But he said, the main thing is it's a healthy child. That's the most important thing. I was quite amazed at his attitude. You know, he was so sort of optimistic, very optimistic person, my father.
My father, yes. What happened during the war to my mother, and you have to remember that my mother was one of the lucky ones. She had 3 brothers and they all survived. So she did not lose any of her siblings. But the trauma of what she went through, those years of waiting to see, you know, expecting to be reunited with the boys, that really did have an effect on her. My mother never hugged or kissed any of us. The only time she actually touched us was when she benched us on Friday night, after my father benched us. I think my mother was frightened to love us again in case something happened. She always had this feeling of what's going to happen when not if it happens again, when it happens again.
What is happy? They seemed contented. They had lots of friends, busy lives. Perhaps, I hope so. It wasn't something that was brought out in song and dance or anything. Well, I do hope they were, but it wasn't. People didn't think of in those sort of terms.
Yes, very. Very happy people they were. That's for sure. I don't know what everybody else felt, but that's how I felt.
Over the years, I heard stories. Like at one point, when we lived in, I don't know where it was, he was accused of rape. My father was accused that he'd raped the Ozerit. You know. After that, he made up. They found out it was a story that she was paid or somebody wanted to get at my father, anxiously. And after that, he decided he never shook hands with women. He said he does not touch women, you know, not to my wife and children. He said because he doesn't want to give anybody the excuse to say such a thing. But there was a court case. He was found not guilty because he was not guilty.
No, they didn't tell us too much. My mother told us that my father had been in business with somebody else and he embezzled him, and my father had to leave the town, and then he went to Michelstadt. He wasn't living there. And I know he didn't like to work as a chauffeur. He did not like it, but he had no choice.
He did speak about them. I mean, there was cousins, and I didn't even know which was cousins, which was brothers and sisters, but he did know about them. And when my parents came to Israel the first time, there was one who lived, I think, in Haifa. Different people, they mess up with these people. They were mentioned, but you know what? Who went to America? Who had money to go to America? It was like they could have lived on the moon, as far as we were concerned. So, but they did talk about them. They were in contact with them.
I don't know about sending invitations to weddings. My parents were very practical people. They realized family wasn't going to travel from Argentina. They weren't going to cut. I mean, nowadays, communication is such a whole different story. If my parents spoke to their living siblings once a year, if it was a lot, people didn't have the money. It was an expensive thing to do. Did they write letters? Maybe, I don't know. Certainly they kept in touch, because eventually my father's one surviving sister, who had gone to Argentina with her husband when the things got bad in Germany, they emigrated to England. They actually emigrated the exact same year. They came to England. that I and my family went to Australia. I remember this because we gave them all our furniture.
Oh, well, first of all, yes, we knew all about the families, both my parents, where those who had escaped and unfortunately those who didn't escape. There were no photos exchanged, as far as I can recall, but we certainly were in letter contact. I recall that Rosh Hashanah time, my parents writing on the old-fashioned blue airmail letters and leaving space so each of us girls could write a few lines at the bottom what we were doing in our lives. There was definitely contact.
We did keep in touch with them for sure. I don't think they phoned very much, they used to write letters. I mean, we knew about these uncles and the aunt, we did know. I must admit I never knew about all the ones who died like you've written in the book. We didn't interest ourselves in it really, we really didn't.
They spoke to each other in German. They spoke to us in German. I think as the years went on, they spoke English, but I can't remember. I really can't remember a particular time when German was always the first language in our house.
Right. They spoke to each other in German. They spoke to us in English. That's where my smattering of German comes from listening to them. They spoke German with their friends when they came round, but to us, my mother was very fluent in English and Daddy broken English, but he made himself understood, and of course as the years went by, they improved.
They must have spoken some German because I know German from them. I can understand German. I can't speak it very well anymore because it comes out of it. Judy still answers the phone, yeah. She does. If you phone Judy, she answers, yeah.
Yes and no, we discussed it.
I do not remember that at all. But it's possible. He's never said that to me.
It is true, but he didn't ask me because I was too young. Didn't go out with boys when he was 7 or 8 or 9. But he did tell my sisters that, I do know that.
We all kept the same Yiddish traditions. One of the big things, I know it's not maybe if you're not religious, but you wash before you eat, you wash. Now, most people make Kiddush and then they wash. But the Yiddish thing is to wash first and then make Kiddush. And we still do it. Oscar's family did it as well. That definitely came from my parents. And people say, well, why do you do that? I said, well, that's what we did in Germany. I don't remember who did it, but that's what we did at home.
My parents were people. They were rarely home. They were out helping all the time, the remnants of the camps in Europe. They encouraged us to do the same. I remember at a very, very young age, I used to go 3 times a week to this lady. I always thought she was very old, but she couldn't have been, otherwise she wouldn't survive the camps. And I used to go to her after school, and I used to do a bit of shopping for her. I used to do a bit of washing for her. She couldn't walk very much, and I believe my older sister Judy did the same. I took from that home the most important thing in my life: to be very, very cognizant of what the community needs and to be there if you possibly could. And I'm glad to say that my children, somehow or other, also have got that feeling. They're all community minded. They all invite people to their homes all the time. They're always trying to find things to do to make the community a better place. I would like to think they got that from me, and I certainly got it from my parents. And maybe that is what happens. Maybe you just emulate your parents and it just goes down the line. I would like to think so.
I think mainly to do with food.
I remember a lot of things. I remember a lot of things my parents said. The funny thing is I was very, very close to my mother. But now I remember all the things that my father taught us. All the little ideas and things. I remember when we had to choose something to let's say there was an apple. So my father used to say, one cuts and the other one chooses. So that the one who's cutting makes sure it's right. I remember, and Judy remembers all those little things too. I remember he always told us if somebody asks you, do you like my dress? And they've already bought the dress, you have to say you like it. If they haven't bought it, you can tell the truth.
Do your best. Try to think the best of people, which is not easy. There are a lot of very stupid people around. But I mean, one of my grandchildren is renting a flat, but on his own, he's not married. And I said to him, "Are you going to share your flat with somebody?" And he said, "No, I don't like stupid people." So I said, "Well, not everybody's stupid. Most people are stupid. I'd rather live by myself." And it's not really true. Not most people are stupid, but some are. But do your best. Try not to hurt people. And they say don't gossip. Everybody gossips. You can't help it. It's nature.
Don't be judgmental. You want to live your life a certain way. You live your life. Don't criticize other people for being more or less than you. This is where all the world's problems start from. People are not tolerant of other people. If we were more tolerant of each other, we would not have these wars. We would not try to impose our will, our religion, our lifestyles on anybody else. And there would be a lot more peace in the world. So I say this all the time to people. Just because somebody is less religious than you, you don't call them a certain name. And if somebody's more religious to you, do not refer to them as fanatic. Live the way you want to live. Let them live the way they want to live. That would be my message.
Never give up. Whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability and pursue. Don't let others put you off things which you think are right and should be done.
People should appreciate their families a bit. That doesn't mean they do, but that I can say.
We were on the border for hours, and the Queen was waiting on the other side on the Dutch border on her platform, and Prince Bernhard. They were waiting, and they were waiting and waiting. They said they would not leave that place until they released us. And I remember Hans Katz, he needed to go to the toilet. And he was really desperate. And the first time they didn't let him go. And I said, "Come on, Hans, come with me. We both go under the toilet. They won't stop me." I remember doing that. And as I was taking Hans by the hand, they let him go to the toilet. And I went to the girls. I didn't need to go, but I did out of principle. We were held on the station in one room. There was a train. There was Holland, the opposite side, and there was Princess Juliana, she wasn't queen yet, and Queen Wilhelmina came as well to wait, and Prince Bernhard waited for us to get released to them, and they made them wait. Oh, we waited nearly 24 hours, and we were put on the platform and gently taken by the hand by helpers, you know. I mean, night after night, I did 3 or 4 kilometers across woodland, not open road. And I passed messages on and all sorts of things, yes. It was a duty. You did. Called for a midday prayer and then meals, and I was told, and the nuns and all the other students came around us, consoling me, and Paul was with the monks, you know, in another place, the other end of the town, and he was told as well. I saw him crying and always praying and, you know, and doing that. And one morning, and it was very busy, he was crying, and I was fed up seeing him doing that. I said, that's not going to bring anybody back. It's to do with the Jewish, you know, that's what they do in the morning, you know, and sitters and all that. I said, that's not going to bring him back. I said, but what counts, what you do every day, how you behave to the rest of the family, that does count. She did cry, of course. Sons. They were only boys, they weren't yet grown men, were they? But she was so pleased I had survived and not dead, you know. I didn't want anything, no religion at all. I'm an atheist. Where was God when we needed him? If you had had my life, and what my brother went through, and little Odette, I tell you, you wouldn't be religious. It's important to survive, not only for yourself, but if you have brothers and sisters or cousins, to make sure that they survive with you. You're the younger generation, and you're going to come up and you're going to bring children into the world who carry on. I mean, those who were killed and died shouldn't have died and been killed for nothing. All right? Yeah. They are your fathers, your brothers, your uncles, your aunts, your sisters, yeah, and your mothers. So remember that. And for them, you have to live. Even if you don't want to live, you have no right to take your life. But you've got every right to fight to the death.
My father was very, very, very good at everything. He could do everything. He could cook and everything. And one day, he said, I can do anything, he said. I said, well, I know one thing you can't do. I said, you can't sew. I can, he said, and I do. I said, I can sew. What do you want me to sew? So I said, all right, thought of something easy for him, as in a pinafore. He sat down at the sewing machine, he made them. I didn't know he could sew, he could cook and he could bake, and every week he made the chopped liver. He really did everything, but I really thought he couldn't sew, but he said, I can sew, and he did.
Oh, he was a brilliant man. Daddy was just unbelievable. And a very fair man, and a very clever man. And I remember we girls, when I was a child, we all slept in one, well, it seemed at the time to me a great big room. And the worst thing was, particularly during the war and the later stages, when I was a bit older, we took it in turns. Turns were very common in our house. We had working days, everybody took a turn. Somebody had Monday, somebody had Tuesday, somebody had Wednesday. And if you were going out, obviously this is when we were older, then you swapped with one of somebody else. But the worst thing as a child was to be the one to have to turn the bedroom light out. Because then, with the blackout, you were in absolute pitch black. And I remember, I don't know what I did, but I do remember my father giving me a choice. I can either have a good hiding, which of course at the time I didn't realise because he never ever laid a finger on any of us, no matter how we tried him. Either to have a good hiding or to have to turn the light off for a whole week. And I hummed and I hawed and I hummed and I hawed, and I chose. I don't know why, because as I say, he never laid a hand on us. I chose to turn the light off for a week, and boy, I have never forgotten it.
We lived in a big house in North London, and Mum would go out and forget her key. And Naomi and I slept on the half landing, up one flight of stairs. And I would wake up and hear, Ruth. And suddenly I'd realise, it's Miriam. She's stuck outside. I'd have to go down and let her in. I don't know why she always forgot her key, but I do remember that.